Hey guys, back again. So, as you would see by the title on the video, today we're going to talk about how do we feel loved when we've never felt loved. And I just thought that was just the most profound question, isn't it, really? Because I think a lot of us who probably never felt loved struggle to allow ourselves to actually feel loved. Now, anyone that's watching this, probably if you felt loved from your parents, from people around you, probably wouldn't be listening to this. So I'm talking to the people that maybe have struggled to feel loved when they've never actually felt loved. Because if you don't feel loved, in those first 7 years, and of course, I'm not blaming parents, but we're just saying it as it is. Some of them did their best and failed miserably. And so growing up in an environment where children were seen and not heard didn't actually leave kids feeling loved. It left them feeling unheard, unseen. There wasn't attention. And if it was perhaps negative. What have you done wrong? Or, if you're going to cry, I'll give you something to cry about. So if you never felt loved, in the first that you can remember, because a lot of people, they'll say things like, oh, I know I was loved. And I say, yeah, but did you feel loved? And that's a whole nother ball game. And we've talked about this many times, about how the head and the heart can kind of rationalize the fact that, oh, I know I was loved. Well, how do you know you were loved? Okay, maybe they stayed together. Maybe they, created a nice house, gave you food to eat. And that's great. Absolutely. Some parents did a really good job there. But sometimes if you were seen and not heard, that's how we know that we're important, that we matter, that I exist, that, I'm, because of the way we're seen and heard and the attention we got paid. And so if you're only paid attention when you've done something wrong, or you've got a bad report card, or you fell out with your brother and sister and somehow maybe it was always your fault, and you never felt seen or heard or understood, or there was no empathy, it was do as you're told, stop crying, also give you something to cry about. It doesn't matter if you don't like that food, you're going to eat it anyway, and you're going to be grateful for it. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, and it was said with the best intentions, because that's maybe all you had to eat. So there was a reality there. And this is why I say parents did do their best, but they failed miserably, because the one thing we needed as kids is a little bit of empathy. Oh, I know it's hard when the only food you've got is stuff you don't really like, but kind of that's all that's on the table at the moment, that's all we could afford to buy, or I don't know, there's a different way you could have said it other than just eat it. Because I think from parents' perspective, it's like they're just being ungrateful, and of course we weren't seen, we weren't heard. Maybe you had parents that leaned on you, that took from you, that expected, that made you responsible for their happiness. Emotionally, they drained you. Excuse me. And so how do you feel loved if you've never felt loved? How do you feel? And this is the trouble, isn't it? It's like, because what happens is, if you never felt loved, you close those emotional parts down. It's like, we're adaptive. We're very good at adapting into the situation. So maybe our heart starts off being very open and expectant and looking at these people, but after a while, after a few years and a few months and days and weeks go by, and you realize nothing's coming, because maybe they're just trying to put food on the table, maybe they're busy, maybe they're stressed, maybe they're depressed, maybe they're grieving, maybe they're really unhealthy and very immature parents, and that's as good as you're going to get. And so from the perspective of us, it's like, well, how do I manage this environment where I'm not actually feeling loved? And you shut that part of you down, you kind of protect it, you put a brick wall around it, you cover it in a coating of defenses. Oh, I don't need that, I don't want that. You even tell yourself you don't want it, I don't need it. I mean, you do, but you tell yourself you don't, to protect yourself. So we're always in protection mode. I've got to protect my tender heart. And this is where people, they're too afraid to be vulnerable, to allow themselves to let love in. And so they go around being super independent, highly independent. No, I don't need anything. I don't need anyone. I don't even want love. because we're terrified, because the people that were supposed to love us couldn't do it. So how the hell is this one going to do it? And totally that was me. It was like I felt like, oh no, I was very defensive, and I was very, I looked like I didn't need anything. And there was this desperately wounded part of me that I had to protect because I never felt loved. Now that doesn't mean they didn't love me. That means I never felt loved. So I'm not saying anything about them. They're just doing their best. And this is why playing blame games, yeah, do it once, but then you have to stop doing it. Yeah, okay, they didn't have the wherewithal. Maybe they were immature, or, insecure parents, or, frightened parents, anxious parents. And they're just trying to do their best. But I never felt loved, appreciated, seen, heard. And so if you go to your parents, even, this goes on, doesn't it? And they're always disappointed with you. Oh, you didn't get the grades, or, you don't do what they tell you to do, especially when you get older. And there's this disappointment in their face. And then somehow that little heart of yours it's never good enough. It's never enough. I'm never enough. Because your job isn't to please them. But they think it is on some level. They want you to do they want to control you. Absolutely. Do as I say, not as I do. Do what I want you to do. And invariably we let them down and we disappoint them. And if there's a part of you that felt never enough, insecure, inadequate, not seen, I don't matter, I'm insignificant, I'm unimportant, I don't deserve, then that's going to be triggered every time. And this is why I think some children struggle with their parents still, even as an adult. Because when they go there, it's kind of triggering those emotions. And this is why we're seeing a real spate. And it's getting quite a bit of airplay, I think, on the internet, on social media, where parents, children are kind of disconnecting from their parents. And they are actually making decisions not to want to spend time with them, or to just shut them out of their lives. And this is devastating for the parent and the family, because, and I understand absolutely how hard it is. But if you are continually putting yourself in front of someone that reminds you that you're not enough, you're not good enough, you're not important, and demands that you do it their way, then it's like you have to betray yourself, and that sometimes becomes really hard to do. So I can't do that anymore. I can't betray myself anymore. So I'm going to have to withdraw, because when I'm with you, I feel like I have to, because it's I need to make excuse me, I need to make you happy. And I think there is that real sort of waking up of people realizing, actually, if you go to someone and every time you go to them, somehow you just feel miserable, down, depressed, angry, frustrated, hurt, wounded, then obviously that's uncomfortable for you. So why would you keep putting yourself back in that position? And of course, if you speak up, then usually those sort of insecure, immature parents will just be very defensive and not want to take responsibility of perhaps their part in this relationship. So that can be really tricky. And so how do we feel loved when we've never felt loved is about realizing that, for example, actually I never felt loved. And I think that's a big deal for a lot of people. And I talk to people, and it's very hard for them to come to that point where so in your head, they loved you, but in your heart, did you actually feel loved? Well, no. And that's a lot of courage to actually say that in the first place. But that's the first step. The first step to change is always surrendering to the what is. And the what is I actually didn't feel loved. And you can hold those two truths. A lot of people struggle with that because they're very black and white. Black and white is a distorted thinking pattern that comes from a very wounded place. When you are much more connected and healed and integrated, you realize those two. I know my parents loved me, but I can also support the fact that I didn't feel loved in those moments. And really, that's just the way parents brought up all the kids. I mean, this is the way we did parenting a few years back. I mean, it's changed, but this is something, I mean, and still, even now, parents are busy. They haven't got the time, they rush back. They're trying to put food on the table, trying to keep the house clean. I don't know how parents, I mean, I did. I worked and had kids, and it was a stressful time. And to actually give the kids the time and energy they need, even the best parents haven't got the time, energy and space to do that. They're working, they're stressed, they're busy, trying to put food on the table, trying to pay their mortgage. So I have a lot of empathy for people who are bringing up kids, but also back in the day when you brought up kids, that's just socialization 101. That's just the way, spare the rod, spare the child, that kind of thinking around children. Life is tough, and we may need to make them tough, and we can't mollycoddle them. So they kind of tended to withdraw, step back, and be quite authoritarian or neglectful, very laissez-faire, just get on with it, or a mixture of the both. One minute they were laissez-faire, which is hands-off, seemed to neglect us, and the other time they were overly disciplinarians and really kind of came down hard, authoritarian. Do exactly as I tell you, don't do this, do this, that kind of. So there were sometimes a mixture of the both. Neither works, and it's that middle ground where you are authoritative but loving, caring, kind, strong, empathic, but also very boundaried and very so they knew, and stable. And I think, I'm not sure if any of us kind of, maybe some did it better than others, but generally that's a lot of us that were born, even. It doesn't matter. Take it on all its individual basis, because that was just generally the way children were brought up. Generally now we understand that empathy plays a big role, respecting children. And this is why we've kind of gone the other way. Beat your kids, do whatever. Now you can't touch them, can't lay a finger on them. So they're trying to help us do better, but actually it doesn't work. Anyway, that's another discussion, isn't it? So how do I feel loved when I've never felt loved? To recognize I never felt loved. And what was that like for you? What did it feel like to be brought up in a place, situation, environment where you never felt heard or seen or accepted or loved, or you never felt those things? It wasn't okay to be you. Well, first of all, you have to recognize, okay, so that makes sense. That makes sense why, I think this and I feel this. I'm kind of disconnected within myself. I think one thing, but I feel another. And so you recognize that, okay, that little girl, that little boy never felt seen or heard or understood. Okay, that's a great place to be. Now what? Okay, well now I have to reparent that little boy or little girl. And this is what we can do. This is why reparenting, inner child work is so powerful. I have to recognize that little part of me didn't feel like she was enough or heard or seen or good enough or important or deserving. And I have to rewire that in. And this is where we do the work. This is the power that we can take back, because we don't have to wait for someone else to do it. We have to do it. We have to be that loving, kind parent that sees us, that listens to us. And that's why the key to all of this is to listen. In a way that we never got heard or seen or listened to, we need to start listening to ourselves. So what's your emotional part telling you? It doesn't mean, just because you listen, it doesn't mean you have to take that on board. It's like listening is about hearing, understanding, giving yourself time, attention. And in that, that's a loving stance, to be seen, to be heard, to be listened to. When we feel like someone really heard us, we feel better. We feel like, someone is trying to understand us, even if they don't exactly. But they're willing to listen. And that's what we have to bring to ourselves, because that little part of us isn't safe. So we'll always kind of hold it, we'll protect it, okay? And what we do then is push others away. And so the person that you want to love the most, that you want to let love you, is often being the one that you're enacting this with, because it's like, nah. And you're always trying to protect yourself. That doesn't equate to a good, healthy relationship. Because if you're not familiar with what's happening to you, so maybe someone says, your partner says something and you feel hurt, and then you just get defensive and lash out and push back. It's that doesn't work, does it? Defensiveness can really impact. And I'm not sure if you can love someone who's got the whole walls up around them. You know, you want to love that person, but they're like, no, it's not safe, because the people that were supposed to love me hurt me, and so this one's probably going to do the same. So you do have this subconscious belief that, you know, if these buggers can't love me, then this probably one can't either, and I don't love me. And so, well, I don't like those aspects of me. And this is why we end up hating on ourselves. And then that just gets projected out. So how do I allow myself to feel loved when I never felt love? Is to understand that that was the case. I never felt loved, and to acknowledge that part of you that is kind of scared. And this is why it's about vulnerability. It's about knowing yourself well enough to go, actually, I felt really hurt when you said that. And if that other person just pushes back and says, and doesn't care, right? If that other person doesn't care that you felt hurt, I mean, your feelings aren't their responsibility, but if they don't even care that you felt hurt, then what's that about? You know, does this remind you of someone else that didn't care when you felt bad? You know, when you were little and you were scared and you were vulnerable and lonely, and that parent wasn't really listening. You see, that's why often these relationships in the now will harken back to the pain of the past. And this is why it takes a lot of courage to really allow yourself to be loved. Really allow yourself to open up the heart space and realize how much you've, you know, gone all defensive and put all those obstacles around you to protect yourself, and that's not working. It keeps you isolated and it keeps others out. And I think the biggest cry that I hear in couples is they won't talk to me. They don't tell me they don't tell me. They won't speak to me. They're not honest with me. I don't trust him or her because they're not being honest. And I get it. I absolutely get that, because it wasn't, you know, if you went with your emotional heart to the people, the godlike figures in your life, who were perhaps supposed to be there to listen, to support, to allow you to feel that. But what did they do? No, don't come to me with your emotions. Shut down, repress, deny, and avoid, right? And so my emotions now are shame-based. So to actually be able to share how I feel, even with this person, because this person is just reflecting sometimes what we experienced back here, well, that now becomes shameful. I can't sit and talk about that. That's my needs are shame-based now. My emotions are very shameful for me, because I was told, no, I won't love you if you reveal those anger, sad, oh, for goodness sake, cheer up, oh, for goodness sake, don't feel that way. How dare you be angry with me? And if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry for. So the message is repress, deny, and avoid. And so that is where I think doing a little bit of work, therapy, understanding that actually this is why I've been conditioned, and this is my subconscious playing out because I'm scared. I'm in protection mode because my feelings weren't valid, weren't warranted, weren't valued, you know, and no one said sorry. No one said sorry, you know. Oh, and we didn't have the wherewithal. We couldn't have done this as kids. You just haven't got the capacity to do this as kids. And so you're just being a kid and they're just being the grown up. None of that works sometimes. But as you grow and get older, you realise, okay, this is what's happened. This is why I feel the way I do. This is why I'm, you know, I feel isolated. I feel alone in a room full of people. Because that disconnection from self and then disconnection from others. That's why relationship will be your biggest challenge. So how do you feel loved when you never felt loved? You recognise, I never felt loved. And what are you going to do about that? You know, this is your responsibility. If there's a part of you that never felt loved, then maybe you need to step up and start loving that part of you. Maybe that's something you can do, because this, believe me, this is the only thing you can do. You can't do that. You can't control anybody. I mean, you might try, but that's the helplessness and the frustration that we feel. So hopefully this has given you something to think about. Even just, this is a discussion that you can just start. I think I actually never really felt love, so that's why it's really hard for me to feel loved. But then when I start, for me, it was like when I realized this, and I started realizing, this is my responsibility to now listen to my own heart in a way that maybe my parents couldn't. And not because I wasn't lovable, because maybe they didn't have the wherewithal to do that. But anyway, come back to me. I can listen to my heart. I can hear and allow and acknowledge and validate how I feel. My feelings doesn't always mean it's true. Someone can be loving you till they're blue in the face. And I often say that to clients. I say, we could all be here loving you till you're blue in the face. But if you don't feel lovable, then it's just going to go straight over your head. And it's going to be kind of frustrating for everybody around you, because we're trying to love you and support you, but actually it's all, no. Do you understand that? Is that helping you to see that actually it's all about you and you? And this is something you can do something about. And so if you're struggling in a relationship and you realize that you're angry and frustrated and resenting and not appreciating this partner, but always feeling like not enough or disappointed or bad or less than, then maybe that's the work you need to do on you. If you come back to you, you see, and do a little bit of work, maybe it will become a bit clearer. Something to think about. Anyway, I think we'll leave it there today. That's a long one, 21 minutes. Okay, take care. See you soon. Bye.